Yeah, so the image got bright, didn't it? The last video, because I have this light source here, which is a window, and it's a cloudy day. So when the clouds disappear for a while, it gets brighter in here. So if I wanted to control the light, I just shut the window and use lights. Anyway, I think about that, but my production values here suck, so who cares? Anyway, I'm going to do one more um, piece here. Again, it's my friend indi.ca. It's called The Unique American Empire. And I've often referred to American Psycho, the movie and the book, over the years, because I think it's a great illustration of a certain type of attitude that we have and export around the world. So he's talking about earth, water, and air all bowed to its superior firepower. So it's interesting. Terms, he uses the term white empire, okay? It's metaphorical. He's not being racist. He's not saying that white boys like me are all sickos. But, you know, the West, the European age of empire, colonial, British Empire, West. It's the thing. It really existed, and you know it has its own way of doing things and has had a major effect on the world. Now, human beings are fire apes, so arguably we started to. Well, our impact on the world really started with our ancestors, even other species of hominid, not necessarily just Homo sapiens, but we use fire. We're fire apes. And cooking is a big deal because it made it easier for us to eat a lot of different things. It was kind of a means of pre-digesting. So it made more nutrients available to our brains and our bodies. That had a huge evolutionary impact on hominids. And so it's a big deal. And then later, obviously, people talk about agriculture and so on. But that's kind of a narrative about domestication of the world. And who's that domestication for? If you're working in the cotton fields, who's that for? So there's always a power hierarchy there to talk about, think about, and notice. So the white empire has been, you know, the belligerent, uh, talented Mr. Ripley of Europeans running roughshod over the rest of the planet because they could and because the rest of the planet just didn't have their way of thinking about things, and maybe climate and where they were situated, you know, had something to do with their attitudes and their need to go out and conquer. So he talks about that. So he says, I made up the name White Empire because I got tired of repeating America plus Europe plus the UK plus Canada plus Australia plus occupied Japan plus occupied Korea, etc. The greatest trick the devil pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. The British Empire was proudly rule Britannia, but American Empire is the amorphous rules-based order. So what America is doing in the middle of all of them, helping, total bullshit. It's not really helping, but you know, it's convinced people that this rules-based order is a thing, and it's problematic. So white people just take turns beating us with different excuses. First, it was because we didn't believe in their God. Now it's because we do. He has a fun turn of a phrase. Same shit, different day, as my historical thesis leads. So I'll just quote some things here. You should read it. I hope you would, but you might not like it because it doesn't say you're great and you're the best thing since smartphones. Used to be sliced bread. Now it's the best thing since smartphones. American empire. Oh, colonialism isn't a thing. Neocolonialism isn't a thing. None of these things are things. We're so ahistorical now. We don't even want to know how things became the way they are. They used international institutions to cover up their war and siege machinery and spread newspapers to sop up the bleeding. For a certain generation, asking them about white empire is like asking a fish about water. What the fuck is water? The white empire is clear, it's invisible, it's default, so you won't notice it. America can point nukes at everyone and has used them on innocent civilians, but if anyone even thinks about nuclear power, not even nuclear bombs, that's a crime that their children must be traumatized for. America got the British government to arrest an Australian citizen, Assange, on American charges like those countries don't exist. Uncle Sam says so, you do it. You jump. How high? You jump. As high as Uncle Sam tells you to jump. In the same way, America got Canada to arrest a Chinese national for violating U.S. sanctions because Canada doesn't exist either. So people are literally surrendering their sovereignty to the rules-based order. I wouldn't even say the United States or America anymore because it's this global corporate machine run by a very small number of people. It's not the Davos crowd like a conspiracy. It's that whole system. The white empire is just a neo-colonial mob family. So I always tease that Uncle Sam is like a mob boss, right? With made nations, you're made. You're going to be a made man. Made nations that can do whatever they want, and unmade, undeveloped nations that get preyed upon. So I would say Congo isn't made, but they have stuff that we need. So we're going to finance certain rebel groups and whatever, insofar as we can get in there and get the materials out of there that we need. It's not enough to say Africa should have entrepreneurs and pick itself up by the bootstraps and become like Americans. We still have to understand how parts of the world are used by the most powerful elements in the world, and what it's all there for. It's there for GDP, 3% growth year on year, and competition in the commons, right? Multipolar traps. It's like a sword of Damocles hanging over the head of a king who doesn't give a shit about that, because when the sword finally falls, the horsehair breaks. The sword just falls on, poor people. So, there's no sense of responsibility for externalities anymore or collateral damage, if there ever was. So the Sword of Damocles is a nice story, but really? You really want to know what it's like to be somebody in the hot seat like Donald Trump with all those responsibilities and all those enemies and so on and so forth. You're the mob boss. People are gunning for me. It's only a matter of time I get whacked and my competition takes over. Nasty game. If anyone tries to investigate a made country like Israel, ICJ, what the hell are you doing? It's a made country. You can't mess with Israel. The mob boss will actually threaten the judges' families, which happened. The G7 in G7 stands for gangster or genocide, if you're on the wrong side of it. So G7, they're the gangsters. And the other side of the equation is of the G is genocide. What our ruling class has decided will be normal. So it's all one military industrial complex with politics as the usual entertainment division. And again, got to read Simone Weil. These political party machines don't exist for you. And if that's okay by you, that's fine. I mean, if you want to be a good tenant farmer and, love Papa at the grand house, Papa, he has my best interests at heart, Papa. Selling your own rape-born children into slavery, dropping nukes on civilian populations, and to invert Fidel Castro, history will not absolve them. America actually lost its ability to field land armies in Afghanistan. You're looking at an earth war in Europe, in Eurasia, between the American Empire, the West, NATO, and Russia. This Eurasian thing that they're scared of. They actually drove Russia and China closer together. But anyway, and can you field an army to go in there? No, but the casualties are horrific in that war, and I don't think Americans have the balls for it anymore. You're not going to go over there and die for that. America simply can't raise the men who are either too overweight, insane, or unwilling, or the material. It's all depreciating rapidly to wage a land war in Asia, let alone 3 like they're trying to do. Their budget is just a measure of corruption, not power. Their bellicosity is bluster. America can't project land power at all anymore. The earth element is lost. You see these telegram videos of recruiters trying to pull men off the streets in Western Ukraine, and they fight. They fight not to go.
Люди, які залучені до цієї роботи, насправді такі самі мобілізовані і кілька місяців тому або кілька днів тому прийшли на службу. Вони ще недостатньо були навчені поведінки, особливостям цієї роботи. І, зокрема, командувач суворо засудив саму організацію цієї роботи, за що керівники обласного центру комплектування, районних центрів комплектування, які до цього дотичні, були притягнуті до дисциплінарної відповідальності.
They're just not lining up like the Russians are to fight. And they don't want to go and die. They just don't think it's worth it. Why the hell did the Color Revolution boss have to crack down on Russian speakers so much? Never mind. It's all Putin's fault. I forgot. Anyway, water. So water is a big thing because, Britannia ruled the waves, right? And now American Navy rules the waves and has for a long time. So the vast majority of ancient empires, and this gets back to the book Against the Grain, were land predators, certainly not global naval powers. China could make treasure ships bigger than the Nina Pinta and the Santa Maria, and then they would go somewhere and give gifts to Sri Lanka and Ceylon or whatever. They didn't need to invade because they were already rich and didn't need anything. So they were just emissaries. The warring tribes of Europe, however, were a different story. They were needy. These savages lived in the most solar-poor peninsula of Asia and had evolved to be especially violent and greedy. the Middle Ages, you know, the Holy Roman Empire, the Vikings, all this stuff, all the wars in Europe, and they needed things. So the Mediterranean Sea gave them lots of naval training, and they later used it to sail across the larger seas, Age of Discovery. Their ships were far inferior to the Chinese, but unlike the Chinese, they needed them. Necessity was the true mother of colonialization, not innovation or exploration. So we have this narrative that it's just about Europeans being so innovative, and they're explorers, intrepid, and they go out and they discover the world. So there are all these places around the world that we, in our narrative, we think were just empty lands, right? Waiting to be colonized by Europeans, because, you know, these Indian tribes, they weren't real people. They weren't making use of the land in a John Lockean kind of way. So, or they had the wrong religion. Europe was poor, and they attacked the places that had resources and wealth. They incarnated their greed as corporations, and once they did, baby gotta eat. So you look at the East Asia or East Indian companies, any of these companies, insurance business, banking business, shares, these were all ways of mitigating the risk of going across to the Americas and getting gold and silver and whatever other resources they needed. So the industrialization of Britain, for example, they needed cotton, you know, to make textiles, and that was a big deal for the empire at the time. And thank God they had fossil fuels and machinery to make that possible as well. And it made them very powerful. And they needed those resources, so they're going to go out and get them. So the reason for colonialism is not actually that complicated, and it explains why colonialism, racism, and climate change are in fact one phenomenon. This article, I've talked about this stuff for so many years, and it just kind of encapsulates it all and puts this energy perspective on it, which is so important. Note that I said Europe was solar poor. Solar energy, which also drives winds, was really the only potential energy back then, with animal, including human labor, to make it kinetic. Even biomass, burning wood, requires sun to grow. Solar energy is what the burning releases. Even wind is ultimately driven by temperature differentials created by the sun. So colonialism is described as a scramble for wealth, but what is wealth really measuring? All currency is just a call on future energy. As Vaclav Smil said, energy is the universal currency. So Nate Hagens, and all of his guests talk about these types of things. And we're not managing this very well. So racism is just an excuse for energy vampirism, if you think about it. Physics abhors an energy imbalance, and it is this force that colonialism uncorked. There was vastly more energy in the South than the North, and the colonizers made it into a circuit using water as a conductor. So all these ancient civilizations moved things around by boat. You know, they were on rivers, or they were boating goods around in the Mediterranean or whatever, the Phoenicians. You need that because it's really hard to transport something by cart. And, you know, just a cart of wood. Imagine jugs and jugs of wine. You want to trade. You put them in a boat and you can move them very quickly all over the place. Rivers are like that too. The Mississippi River in the United States, so important for so many years. There was vastly more, it's still important. And there were vastly more energy in the south than the north, and the colonizers made it into a circuit using water as a conductor. This had been done at small scales before. Ancient empires like the Egyptians or the Indus Valley were usually connected along a river because it's hard to move things or people without the magic of water. Land-based empires are, of course, possible, but very difficult to maintain without the pre-modern version of the internet, the conductive power of water. Yeah, electricity. So water was what made colonialism possible, and it was initially a renewable enterprise, adding just wind power and labor and biomass. Sailing ships could take massive weights across massive distances, and suddenly all of the potential solar energy of the South began flowing north and back around via the kinetic energy of oppressed peoples and slaves. So you need somebody to do the work, and slaves do work. And, the history of slavery is, there's so many different kinds of slavery over history, going back thousands of years. Racism was the human processing of a physical fact, that the sun poor were robbing the sun rich, and wanted to justify it. Climate change is just the consequences of these acts, because moving energy around has consequences. Moving matter and energy does work, and work creates heat, as per the first law of thermodynamics. So I always talk about the omnicidal heat engine, which is our world now, our neoliberal, fossil-fueled capitalism. And the omnicidal heat engine, I forget who originally coined that phrase, but Guy McPherson was using it back in the day when I was watching him talk about climate change. And it is true. Our civilization, our global economy is a heat engine, and it's never going to stop. And we're not doing anything to stop it. So enjoy moving the deck chairs around on the Titanic. And if you have a VIP ticket or pass to the party on the Titanic, have fun, enjoy it, because the ship's going to go down one way or another, and it could happen very quickly, or it could take another generation. So there's that. I'll be fine. It was the original conductor which enabled the first global empires, what I call one white empire. Because what's the difference between the Dutch, Portuguese, and British to people like me? He's talking about his ancestors are from Sri Lanka, although he grew up in the States, this writer, this author. The original white empire was a water nation, but air is what made it into an apex predator. Water empires were good enough for scoring filthy lucre. The stock market actually peaked in the South Sea bubble and hasn't recovered since. And there's a link to an article about that. Stocks for the very long run, the UK 100 and 327 years of British equity history. That's another link. You can learn about these things if you want. But enough is never enough when you've incarnated your greed as corporations and given them the world to feed on. The discovery of fossil fuels meant even more stored energy, solar energy, to turn into work, leading, of course, to greater heat and entropy. While economics happily books profits every quarter, physics marks its ledger by centuries and then rips up the economic ledger entirely. So I guess you could say that nature bats last. If God created the universe, he created all these laws of nature. We call them scientific theories. And thermodynamics is one big chapter of that. And God knows about thermodynamics. World War II was the water-phobic Hitler trying to leapfrog them all through fossil-fueled land and air warfare. World War II was really the inter-imperial battle for a new type of empire, one that marshaled all the elements using the effective magic of fossil fuels. Millions of undead soul earth slaves that you could pipe through a tube. Talking about oil and gas. But Hitler didn't win that war. The racist totalitarian state that inspired him did, America. And it's not controversial that Hitler was inspired by a lot of thinking in the United States. Eugenics, for example. So to this day, most commercial airplanes are made by the USA, Boeing, or their backyard bitch, France, Airbus. Not that other countries didn't or couldn't make planes, it's just that the white empire dominated. The most terrifying power of the US military is its ability to deploy a fully functional Burger King anywhere in the world overnight, followed by its ability to deliver nuclear weapons through the same mechanism, through the air. And if you have hypersonic missiles delivering these warheads, man, things get very, very, very volatile. And the actual gods are teaching them as we speak. That's what climate change is. So climate is like acts of God. Why are there all these tornadoes? Is it because of the woke mob or because of LGBTQ, or is it because of the transsexuals? If we all just white Christian Zionists, God's going to be nice to us. We'll all get rich. All the bad guys will disappear. The immigrants will go home, and Handmaid's Tale will be a reality. The fact is that all this power, all the energy that colonialism unleashed and capitalism capitalized on, has thermodynamic consequences. The first law of thermodynamics says that perpetual motion machines are impossible, i.e., an economy that grows forever. Yeah, you don't have to look at like the Club of Rome and limits to growth. There are no limits to growth, bro. You're just trying to make us poor. You want to take my truck away. The first law of thermodynamics is there, and it's no joke. The white empire is based on its entire existence around that impossibility, infinite growth forever on a finite planet. Well, if God takes us home to the spiritual plane high above this mortal coil, this earth, then we'll live forever and we'll just get richer and richer forever and ever. But physics tells us that that's not possible on planet Earth. Of course, we're going to make a Dyson sphere. We're going to be a multiple planet species because people like Elon Musk say so. And how much energy do we need to make that Dyson sphere? I don't know. Another implication of the first law is that work makes heat. And when you apply this to an economy that's supposed to double every generation, what you get at roughly 3% annual growth, things get really crazy really quick. If we keep doubling the work we do every generation at 2.3% growth rate, the waste heat alone boils the oceans in 400 years. Well, that's a long time away, but I have a feeling that with all the problems with the ocean, acidification, heat, there's so many problems. We're going to see disasters we can't even imagine in the next 10 years. So, the whole idea that we've got 100 years is a joke. But, we got to worry about Trump and Biden. We got to worry about, Israel's right to protect itself and Putler and Xi Jinping and the Uyghurs and everything. Most of this is total bullshit, but this is what we're going to focus on because it's lucrative. It's profits first. It's GDP. It's going to juice up the stock market. Conventional economics obviously kills us over just a few centuries, but it makes a killing next quarter, so who gives a shit? As Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead, speaking for all dead economists. But yeah, 300 years. But what's life going to be like for us over the next 10 to 20 years? And as the AIs and the algorithms and all the, these huge platforms that tell us what to think go online, what's it going to be like for us? I don't know. If you think it's all getting better, please tell me how it's all getting better in the comments or call me up and we'll talk and you can set me straight. The second law of thermodynamics is basically that tea gets cold, energy differentials settle, and you end up with an unpalatable muck, aka entropy. Everything we measure as GDP is garbage. Most of it within a year, all of it within geological timescales. So I always joked about the aliens coming and just, x-raying or looking beneath the surface 100 meters or whatever and just finding e-waste, just finding garbage, like the second version of Blade Runner, just piles of garbage, this living planet, this complex web of life turned into a bunch of junk. And you don't need geological time scale for that. I mean, we'll do it very quickly. Meanwhile, the waste heat and radiation lasts much longer and is our only real legacy to future scientists, should they dare play with these dark arts ever again. Yeah, the heat's going to keep going for a long time, no matter what we do. So, if we don't have all hands on deck and cooperate and coordinate and partner to fix, we're in trouble. But anyway, you got your VIP pass to the party on the Titanic, and bully for you. Have a great time. And the rest of us will just rearrange deck chairs because you got to do something. Got to have a pastime. Keep busy. This process started when we first captured the elements via agriculture or fire before that, increased when we moved them along water and river valleys, accelerated when we moved them across the waters of the ocean, and then really started cooking with gas, with aviation. What goes up must come down. Disorder is easier than order. Fuck around and find out. It's wheels within wheels, and the wheels are all coming off this century. I definitely think that the wheels are coming off now, but some of us just won't notice. So how long is it going to take your average Yankee in America to recognize World War III has started and do something to stop it or to end it? We're just going to wait until it gets really, really ugly. And then maybe if we're lucky, which we won't be this time. There are not going to be any Hollywood movies about this World War. There won't be any D-Day celebrations on the beach somewhere in China for this one. This one ends the whole project, the whole Homo sapien thing. So it's not like, oh, my grandchildren are going to love the movies about the heroes, So your son, your 30 or 20 or 18-year-old son's going to be a hero, and your big consolation is the movie about it. Oh my God. I'm not denigrating what happened in World War II. Those were different times. People stood up in 1945. But, the war was raging in the 30s around the world, and America didn't notice it or get involved until Pearl Harbor. And so, other people were getting crushed for years and years before we sent people to Omaha Beach or to North Africa. It's not to say that those people didn't sacrifice, didn't step up and do their duty. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we have a very, very, very overblown idea of our participation in that. Our biggest coup was, taking over Europe at the end of it and managing to build an empire from 1945 on. It's an amazing thing. It's truly, truly great. But at the end of the day, because of all these things, energy and entropy and these insane ideologies, it just ends in destruction. So America is a historically unique empire because it marshaled all the elements, but we are nearing the logical conclusion to this deep delusion. It is a blasphemous idea that the elements were ours to marshal in the first place, and the gods are slapping us back into place. And I think the gods are just the laws of nature. You know, what comes up? Gravity must come down, you know, evolution, and so on, entropy. As they have done to every empire ever, though it always seems surprising. What? The empire? What? What? I was an empire baby who had the terrible misfortune of having been born after the empire had already been lost. As they have done to every empire ever, though it always seems surprising. Every empire that tried to conquer the earth has turned to dust. Every empire that used water via rivers has seen it dry up. Every empire that sailed the seas has gone under. Air is a seemingly supreme power, but we still can't control the weather. On a long enough time scale, the weather still controls us. That's why we say, nature bats last. The one aspect about American empire that's not unique is that all empires must fall. Dumbasses to ashes, dust to dust. So, yeah, maybe that's difficult to hear for most people who, you know, suck on the bottle of the business as usual narrative day in and day out, that wallow in the water, swim in the water of our world, and don't notice what's going on. But I think these voices are important to hear because we have to look at ourselves in the mirror and understand how things work and hopefully organize with one another to do something about it. I always get cynical because everybody on the internet is having the conversation. You know, I could start a channel where I invite all these really smart people on and talk to them or listen to them like many people have. So if you're famous, if you're noteworthy, if you have a big following, and then my channel would blow up, and I would sit there and listen to them pontificate, and maybe if I could battle my cognitive decline, I would have one or two interesting questions to ask, and we'd have the conversation. You know, Nate Hagens and Daniel Schmachtenberger. Nobody listens to these people. It's over their heads. But they're having the conversation. They're good people. I love these people, but they have absolutely no impact. Because if you believe in democracy, then you have to participate in it. You have to do something. You have to organize with people to accomplish something. And not just be an entrepreneur and get rich, but to do something that makes sense so that we can do better as a community, as a nation, as a culture, as a whatever, as a world, as a species. And then hopefully generations in the future will continue doing better, and it doesn't matter. Nobody gives a fuck about the next generation, really. You know, they're just kids, they're hippies, they're idiots. Gen Z, Gen whatever. They're not like us. They're all morons. I don't believe that. I want them to do better, but who knows if they'll be able to. Anyway, why should I care? I kind of have a VIP pass to the, party on the Titanic, because I live in a peaceful place surrounded by orchards, and I still have my health. So I'm enjoying the party, and I'm rearranging the decks on the Titanic. So I have something to do. Anyway, I'll stop here. Thanks for listening. I hope you read that article. I'll put the link in the description, and have a wonderful time rearranging the deck chairs or at the VIP ball. William T. Out.